Get Brocked here. Since my ship guideline videos seem popular, and this is a video where I talk about the design ethos of what makes a ship class, and people seem to enjoy codified rule sets for what is what in Space Engineers, I figured I'd expand on what I said there and get into what my actual rule set for what makes a ship in my universe, my server, whatever you want to call it. And perhaps that can help you with your design set. Obviously, this doesn't have to be the rules. It's just a set of rules, and it's kind of interesting. After all, Space Engineers has no rules, and since we're kind of in a sandbox more so than an actual game, opposing artificial limitations, not only for performance reasons, but fun, immersion, and gameplay, right? Because we have a multiplayer server, it really enhances the SE experience. I'll be rehashing a lot of what was said in the classification video, but this is much more a focus on rules and less on theories. So the video is going to be more of a this is a destroyer versus that video, which is what should a destroyer do? The objective of this rule set is to create a World War II era dynamic in terms of balance. Our balance system is also omnidirectional. That is, no rock, paper, scissors. It's destroyers beat frigates. Cruisers are designed to destroy lighter cruisers and destroyers, and then battleships kind of kill capital ships, so other cruisers and other battleships. I'm not going to get into the full rule set because there are other rules like how a ship can do things, where fleets can go, whatever, but I'll mention a couple of them so there's context to understand how our balance system is structured. We don't really run a 24 hours a day server. Instead, we play out board games where fleet movements are designed on paper, right? This person wants to move his fleet from this tile to this tile, and it takes a certain amount of time. Ship building takes time, so on and so forth. However, there's no let's play elements for the fleets or the factions. Instead, the moves, when a conflict point occurs, then the conflict point actually gets played out on a PvP match that we stream live on Twitch. I edit it, make a video, and the losses and the gains are all recorded, and we go from there. The only ship that has any kind of Let's Play elements is the Eternity, which gets to roam around every week and do its own kind of thing and interact with the world that's happening. Right? A big aspect of this series is that only 4 ships can be brought to a battle, 4 large ships. You can bring small ships, and that constitute a squadron or a fleet, whatever you want to call it. So the 4-ship limit is a very big part of the balance, right? That's why heavier ships are so much more expensive than lighter ships. Okay, on to the purpose of the video. What is the balance system of my series? Couple mods that are worth considering. We use a modded version of Assault Weapon Pack. That is, the heavy weapons and assault weapons pack can travel up to 19 kilometers, and the 400mm, the capital ship weapon, travels very fast compared to the other weapons, thus allowing long-range siege and capital ship engagements instead of having to, do that Space Engineers close quarters system. All other turrets can auto-engage, including the 400mm, that is, the AI can do it, at upwards of 2,000 meters. The 19-kilometer range has to be done via manual override. We also allow tiered thrusters, and we use a H2O2 capacity increasing mod purely for performance reasons, right? Those lag, so that's not necessarily critical. In terms of ship death, if a ship's reactor is destroyed, that ship cannot be recovered post-battle. You can use battery power to continue the fight, however that ship is considered lost and cannot be retrieved. For certain ships, like the destroyer and the frigate, if the bridge is lost, the ship is considered lost and you can't go to a different control panel and control the ship. The ship is considered lost and unrecoverable. You can continue fighting it with it, like using the turrets, but you cannot recover it. The cruiser will be mobility killed if the bridge is lost. However, you may go to the CIC and jump the ship and kind of control the ship that way, and the ship can be recovered if the CIC remains intact. The battleship can be fully controlled from the CIC. The goal here is that ships actually die, and die in a reasonable time frame, right? Because in Space Engineers, battles kind of take forever otherwise, because ships can be insanely durable, where every single block except, the control seat can be destroyed and the ship being semi-functional at that state. For our weapons, these are considered our light weapons. You notice they all cost about 1 point. are medium weapons. This is basically the light cruiser and destroyer weapon category. You'll notice these all cost about 2 points. The 200mm missile battery is the main medium weapon, if you want to call that. All weapons are kind of contextualized around the 220mm. This is basically your vanilla missile launcher, but has a higher fire rate and damage. We don't really like vanilla weapons, so they're kind of balanced poorly, such that you don't want to use them. Heavy weapons. These weapons are basically just 400mm barrel variants. Casemates are enclosed, and the 400mm turrets are just that, turrets. Once again, as mentioned, these can engage out to 19 kilometers with increased velocity, but this requires manual override, where you manually control the turret, thus encouraging cruise in these ships. The auto-engage range is 2,000 meters. We also have this thing called a FOB, which is not to be confused with a forward operating base. There's the 1,000, which is 10 points, very expensive. You'll see kind of in ships coming up of how many points each ship has. And then the FOB 1500, which is very, very expensive. A double barrel setup, which is very popular. Many of the factions' ships designs cost 30 points, which is about a third of what a battleship can bring to the field. These are basically max, but not quite. The frigate is designed as 100% a utility craft, not meant for straight-up fleet engagements. They're designed to either scout in the fleet engagements or used in an encounter, right, to basically drop off ships. It's worth mentioning at this point, all ships have a mandatory beacon range, and our beacons are indestructible. This serves as radar, right? Thus, engagements can actually happen because space is big and we want to force engagements, right? So the beacon range on a corvette/frigate, we kind of view them as roughly the same category, is about 7 kilometers. There's an alternate version of the corvette, which is the 1,400 block variant, and for every 100 blocks removed from this block count, so if let's say you have a 900 block ship, your detection range, so your beacon range, goes down from 1,400 meters to 900 meters. You can bring it even lower than that. This allows the ship to be used as a black ops ship, thus allowing you to deploy troops in encounters that have troops and stuff like that. It can also be used as a small ship kind of scouting force for calling impacts at 19 kilometers, right? Because you can't see, and it kind of acts as a forward observer. The weapon counts have been nerfed drastically, such that you can really only have minor point defense on this vessel. The destroyer is the main vessel in this universe, so to speak, right? It does a lot of the work because it is so cheap. It can only be light armor. However, the big thing that makes the destroyer viable is that it only takes one episode to build, and you'll see coming up the capital ships take drastically more time. Thus, you can have a lot of destroyers and quickly replenish force with destroyers when you just need stuff. Big point of emphasis, destroyers can use tier 2 thrusters, and because they're light armor only, that means they go really fast. It's worth noting the weapon point and the max turrets allowed on a destroyer are very similar, 20 and 14, meaning you have to kind of specialize your destroyer. There are AA destroyers, which have a lot of point defense and some missiles, which are really good at taking out small crafts. And then there's missile destroyers, which are all missile turrets, and they just don't really have anything left over, right? So destroyers have to specialize. On to the light cruiser. The light cruiser takes 4 episodes to build, and each season is only about 20 episodes, so you can imagine you can't get that many cruisers, and you can't really throw these things away. These things are valuable. The light cruiser has a 30-kilometer antenna range, so big difference compared to the frigate or even the corvette. Weapon points are very similar in terms of max turrets, 18 max turrets. However, you get way many more points. This comes in line with the fact that the light cruisers can both use the axial gun, the FOB, and they can use heavy capital ship grade weapons, those 400 millimeters from earlier. Thus, you can kind of choose what your light cruiser wants to be. Is it a light siege cruiser, right, with a lot of capital grade weapons, or do you want to put a lot of smaller weapons, thus basically being a destroyer heavy, so to speak, thus being able to kill destroyers quite effectively. Cruisers have a very unique aspect in that they're allowed heavy armor, but only in a core, like an armored box. The heavy cruiser variant also gets a roof for the bridge made out of heavy armor, and a belt armor section, 1 block in circumference. The heavy cruiser is slightly bigger, and thus cost 6 episodes. It also gets a slight weapons buff. We have some other categories, but they haven't been deployed, so I don't want to mention them here. I'll make a video when those come out to really describe those categories. So we have things like battle cruisers as well. The final category that has been currently deployed to the series is the battleship, the fast battleship, that is. You'll notice this is significantly bigger, 9,000 blocks. That basically puts it 4 times bigger than a single destroyer. And once again, I'd like to kind of tie back the fact that you can only bring 4 ships to a battle. So bringing a single capital ship to a 4 versus 4 drastically changes the dynamic, and the battle starts being centered around this capital ship. So capital ships are thus ludicrously expensive. Battleships have the unique aspect of having a lot of points to play with, 100 points, 25 turrets. Thus, you're very heavily encouraged to use the axial weapon, the FOB, and to use the capital grade weapons, right? A battleship is kind of wasted if you put medium grade weapons on it and only medium grade weapons. A battleship takes upwards of 10 episodes to make. There are aspects in game to bring that time down. But battleships are very, very expensive. Currently, there's only 1 battleship deployed via the factions. You also get a unique aspect in that battleships are allowed fire control systems. That is, we use Whip's slave turret script. Thus, a single gunner can use a main battery to engage targets at max range. Kind of really feeding into that battleship playstyle, right? We want battleships to kind of be the capital ship killer and what you use to kill other battleships. They work quite well against destroyers, but a swarm of destroyers should be able to kind of bloody the nose of a battleship. We don't really want battleships as the main solution to destroyers. That's what cruisers are for. Okay, that video is kind of short, just kind of getting into what the ships are and to give you an idea of how we do things. The end result is quite unique. We end up in a situation where destroyers are kind of the main dominant force, and even though they get lost a lot, they're easily replenished. And because they're so cheap, factions are encouraged to kind of use them. The cruisers are being currently deployed en masse by both sides of the faction, and it kind of ends up in a scenario where you want cruisers to deal with other cruisers, because if a cruiser is allowed to roam free, it can take out objectives quite easily compared to a destroyer, which has to get up close and personal, and the cruisers kind of seek each other out in battle and fight each other. Since we only have 1 battleship, we haven't had any battleship v battleship action yet. There's technically 2 battleships, but one of them is a special ship. But these ships are utterly devastating when they show up to the battle, very good at sieging down objectives. Thus, they become the main focus of every battle they've been a part of. Okay, I'll link some videos up here. You can kind of look around, see the dynamic of the series, perhaps look at these guides, or just watch the series. Whatever. Get Brock for you. Hope you enjoyed your time here. We'll see you guys around.